I think we'll start the session. We cannot wait any longer. So yesterday we have seen couple of examples regarding Selenium. We have taken multiple web pages. We have done multiple scenarios. Mm, okay. I think you guys need to check your internet speed once. Let me see if I can do something regarding this slowness. Because when I tried, it was pretty fine. But if you feel that it is slow, and you can always try some other system. Okay, it's not that you have to use only one machine. You can always back up your Java files, and every machine, one of you can set up your jar files, and you can get your Java files, and you can always work on it. Okay, if one machine is not working, you can always go ahead and use some other machine. So it's kind of hit and try since we have multiple people. You just have to see which machine is good for your usage. Okay, fine. So yesterday we have seen a couple of examples. We have discussed multiple scenarios. We have written the Selenium code to access different scenarios, and we have seen how it works. So any questions till now? Among the things we have discussed so far, any questions? No questions? Okay, so shall we continue with the next topic? Okay, fine. So you guys are familiar with JUnit, correct? So Sayanthan would have taken your session in doing Java, and he would have introduced you to JUnit, correct? Okay, so what we're going to see, we are going to see two topics today, primarily. One is writing JUnit test cases using Selenium. So that will actually bring up the Selenium in a test case suite as such. Okay. So there are two ways of writing test cases. One is the default JUnit, where you can generally write any test case. So we'll see how we can write a Selenium test case in JUnit. So how does the structure look? How you can actually write a JUnit and etc. Once that is done, we'll be looking at something called as page object model. Uh, so that is when you are actually working on a real-time project. So there is a structure which you have to follow when you create the project. So that is one of them is page object model. Now it is completely up to the client and the managers to decide the architecture in which a test suite has to be written. So we are going to see one of the most commonly used method. So that is the page object model, and we will see if time permits. We'll go to the next topic. Okay. So today we're going to focus on writing a JUnit test case with Selenium and the page object model. Okay. Fine. So to start with, writing a Selenium test case using JUnit. So it's pretty straightforward. So again, whenever you are making a test case, okay, it is advised it's a good habit to always make a new package and put the test cases in that. Okay, so say package dot. I hope you guys are able to see my screen. So you guys are able to see my screen, right? Oh, so here I just made a package named from Selenium test cases, or maybe I should rename it. Okay, let me just rename it. Yeah, this is better. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make a class. Okay, now, so you guys are familiar with annotations, right? So what is at the rate before class? What is at the rate after? What is at the rate test? So are you guys familiar with what is this annotation mean? How does a JUnit test case run? Yes, no? Okay, fine. So when you say JUnit test case, so it comes up with some additional features. Okay, so one of them is this annotations. Okay, now if you see in general, whenever a person generates a test case, let me just open this. Right. So whenever you write a test case, so you always have things which are general. Okay, so among the things which are general, that could be uh, initiating, initializing the WebDriver. So how do you write a test case? So first thing you do in a test case, or whenever you write a Selenium code, is you initialize the test case, WebDriver. Then you load the web page. Correct. Then after that you write your test case, whatever logic you have, the test case. So once your test case is done, probably what would you do is you would like to close the driver or in something else. So it could be, so depending upon the scenario, you could do anything else after the post the test case has been executed. Correct. So this is the general. If you divide your complete program into sections, this would be the main sections in any test case, right? For example, you are testing for a login. So what do? You create a class, you do an initialization of WebDriver, you load the web page, you write the logic for logging in, and then you close the WebDriver. That is what we did. Scenario one, correct? In other scenario, what we did again, we initialized the WebDriver, we loaded the web page, we did the all the clicking parts, and we loaded, we entered the values into the text boxes, we calculated, and then we closed the WebDriver. That is what we did. So here is where it is. Right. So if you see here, so this is pretty common. This is your test logic, and this is what you do at the end of the test case. So so you don't really have to, make multiple classes for each and every test case you write. You can do something called generalize the whole thing. Okay, put the logic of pre-processing into one block and post-processing into another block. And your test case can vary from scenario to scenario. Correct? You guys are understanding what I say? Yes, no? Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, let's consider, let me just close everything. So we have seen three scenarios. Correct? So we written a program in Selenium with three different scenarios so far. One was login case where I just did a login and we tested the if the login is successfully happening or not. Other was just an introduction where we just opened a calculator, we entered the values, and we read the output. And there was another scenario where we opened some other web page where we clicked on the hierarchies. Correct? So let me open those tabs. This was one. Okay, so we have seen these three URLs. We have written the test cases for these three pages. Correct? You guys at least remember these three URLs? Right. So what have we actually done in these three URLs? So if you see the code, this is the code, and I assume everybody is having this piece of code. That first step is you start the Firefox WebDriver and open the URL. Even every place, every test case you see, we have done the same thing. Correct? Right. So, and after that, what follows is your actual test case. That varies from scenario to scenario. What is the logic goes inside that varies from scenario to scenario. Correct? Agreed? Yeah. And at the end, what you do, in simple scenario, you just close the browser. That is driver.close. Right? So if you see a general Selenium flow of writing a test case, you have three sections. Any test case, okay? So you have pre-processing, you have the actual test case, and then you have post-processing. So this is the pre-processing. Basically, you set up the test case, all the required things for the test case you set up in the pre-processing. You have the actual processing or the test case to be executed, and then you have the post processing. Once the test case is done, you have some set of items to be done after the processing is done. Okay, so you take any, not only Selenium test cases, you take any test case. So this scenario is always exists. Okay, so you always have pre-processing, processing, and post-processing. Okay, so that is why you actually get in a test case. So when you actually deal with a test case, when you are writing a test case, so the GA unit framework gives you an option of let me just open this. Right. So a GA unit test case provides you this set of features. So it is called as annotations. Okay. So in these annotations, there are, so mainly you need to know about the three annotations in JUnit, that is at the rate before, at the rate test, and at the rate after. So each one of them serves each one of the section. At the rate before states that whatever function is written underneath that serves as pre-processing. Okay, and generally you add the initialization of browser and you opening the web driver inside, web page inside this pre-processing. So when you write a function and when you give this annotation at the rate before, it becomes a pre-processing block. Okay, and at the rate test is something where you actually put your test scenario, and in one class you can have any number of at the rate test class functions. Okay, and you have at the rate after, which will do your post processing. And generally you just write, if you are dealing with a database, you will see, you try writing the closing the connection with the database, and in case of Selenium you will write closing the browser and the web page and whole application, shutting down the whole thing. You will go into the post processing. Okay, so you guys understood till here? We will see with an example where you will be much more have much more clarification. But in the overall, when you generalize the program, a test case as such, there are three sections: pre-processing, processing, post-processing. Is this idea clear? Okay, fine. And for pre-processing, what you do, you just write a function and you add at the rate before annotation to that. Right. So I am coming to that. Okay. So you will see how useful this particular at the rate before annotation is. The reason being, I can actually merge these three test scenarios. Okay, and write one block, one single block for at the rate and for initializing the web driver. I can write n number of at the rate tests, which means each of this particular logic which I have written can get into multiple at the rate tests, and I can write one block to close the driver, and once I run this, it will execute each one of them. It will give the result for each one of this particular test blocks. Okay, we will see that, no issues. Okay, we will see that happen. Fine. So let's go ahead and then write one scenario and execute and see that. Or let me see if I can execute this particular item over here. Mm. No, let's make it over here. So to start writing with the scenario, let me take the login case. So we will be taking this login scenario. Okay. So I will make one function. I'll say and I will add at the rate before tag to this and make sure it is of JUnit. Okay, and inside this, what I will do, I will put the logic of initializing the WebDriver into that. Now, for me to use this particular variable across all the functions, I'll have to declare it outside so that the scope of this particular variable is throughout all the functions. Okay, and the next thing is to for me is to open the web page. So the logic goes there, and after that, I have driver.close, and I say at the rate after. Okay, now I will go ahead and write my test case. And I'll tag it as at the rate test. So thing you need to make sure is whenever you import the class, the most important thing is it has to belong to JUnit package. Okay, so you might find multiple annotations in multiple packages, but until unless you actually import JUnit as such, this whole framework will not execute according to your the way you expect. You might face issues if you include the classes from some other multiple packages. The most important thing is it has to be from JUnit. So careful when you actually include the packages, import statements. And here in the at the rate test, all I'll do is I will add my scenario. Okay. So before we execute this, one thing you have to understand is how does this actually work? So if you observe, I didn't really write any main class over here. Right? So in so far, whatever logics we have written, I've always included the main because the JVM which executes a Java program needs a starting point. And in general, the main is our starting function to execute. And but in this scenario, I don't have any main. Correct. So how does the execution actually go? So the moment I actually add this JUnit annotations, it becomes a JUnit test case. So when a JUnit test case is executed, so we have this JUnit framework which actually takes care of executing execution order, and the execution order goes like this. So it will check the number of at the rate test functions we have in the program. Okay, so the number of tests you have is the number of test cases you have written in this particular Java program, Java file. In our scenario, we have only one test case. Because why? Because we have only one test function. So for every test case you write, it calls before once and after that execution of this. So before executing this test, before will be called, and once the test is executed, it calls after. And it happens for every test function which you have mentioned, which essentially means for every test case it calls this function once and this function again. Next. So let me put sysO statement inside pre-processing, inside login, inside post-processing. So execution order is pre-processing, test case, post-processing. So if you have one more at the rate test, so just in case if you have another at the rate test, so this will be the second test case. So the order would be, sorry, at the rate before, test case 1, at the rate after, again at the rate before, test case 2, and at the rate after. And that is how the execution happens, and it is the JUnit framework which takes care of calling each of these functions. The function call will be happened by the JUnit framework, so you don't really have to worry about anything. The theoretical matter, is this clear, or you have any questions? You understood something? No? Yes? Okay. So let's go ahead and execute this. So right click. So automatically you can see it starts prompting for JUnit test, run as JUnit test unit. So it says inside pre-processing, the browser opens. Okay, I see there are, okay. There has been some, no such element, unable to locate the element, method, ID. We have the driver. Let me put an implicit wait. That's the sample part. Right. Yes, we can have any number of test cases at the rate test. There is no such limit. So you understood? So if you see the print statements over here, it says at the rate inside pre-processing, at the rate sample, and at the rate post-processing. So all it did is it opened the browser. Since we have not written any test case, so it's only a print statement, and then at the rate post-processing, it closes the browser. Again, since there is another at the rate test, it executes at the rate before, so it is in pre-processing again at the rate login, where you have seen it has entered the username password, and it has logged in. We can see the inside login, central pollution control board login successful, and once the test case is done, you have at the rate post processing, so basically it closes the browser. So this is how you generally write a JUnit test case, and there is no any limit. It's again as per the design of the test application. So it might go scenario by scenario, page by page. It's probably that you can have, there are multiple test scenarios in a single web page. So in general, you maintain one test class for every web page, and all the scenarios for that particular web page goes into one particular class. So that is where you will have at the rate one at the rate before and one at the rate after, and you will have multiple test case for every test scenario. There is no such limit for the number of test case. The test you can write in a single class. Clear? Mm, there is no such order as such. So probably it generally goes from the last one to the first. Since each one of them is independent, if you need, you can always comment the rate test and execute the test case which you need. Now we have TestNG, that's another testing framework. There you can actually give the order in which the execution wants. Uh, we will actually, when we come to that, I will show you the test execution order. But in this scenario, so it's just from the last to top. I will check once more regarding the order of execution. Once I find something, I'll let you guys know. Okay, but since each test case is independent of other, there is no order as such being maintained. So it's from the last one to the first one. Okay, are we clear with this? So writing a Selenium test case using JUnit, are we clear? Any questions? Okay, fine. Just a minute. Yeah, so we don't have a main function. The JUnit test framework takes care of calling the functions in order. Mm, what do you mean by different classes? See, if you have execution logic present in different class, you can always initialize that particular class out here. Inside at the rate test, you just have to call that functions class. You need to call that logic. So you can always initialize your class over here. Okay. uh, probably I'll take select. So assume that this is your class. So, and this particular class has, what happened? Oh, right. So assume this is your class. So you can always initialize your class and use this object and call any functions inside the class. But only thing you need to take care is that that particular calling position is inside an @test function. That's all. You cannot write a test case, either a test function as such in some other class. It has to be present inside this. But the logic as such of executing something can be present in some other class. You can always initialize the object and use that particular call of function. But the @test as such should be inside this test case. Any other questions? No? Okay. So let's go to the next topic. It is page object model. Okay. Now, right. So now what we're going to see is a general methodology of writing a test scenario. So you take a web application. Okay. How do you go for and put the code in a structured manner? So among the structures, we are in test cases. So one of them is page object model. So what is this page object model? How does it actually look? So we will go with an example. Okay, and for that, so I already have a code ready. So let me just not type the whole thing and let me just take this and explain you guys the whole scenario. So for this, let's go back to our the starting example. So we have this web page, correct? So in this web page, assume that you are writing the test cases for this complete web application. Okay. The ideal scenario of following the structure is you write the classes, not the test cases. So you write the class which takes care of handling all the click events, all the input handlers present in the web page as a function. Okay, and you write the test case for that particular page, and all you do is you don't really write the page event handlers inside this test case, but in what you do is you actually call the functions which are already defined in this class. Why? Okay, the reason being is uh, what actually happens when you go in a real-time project is the web application which you have, okay, will have multiple blocks, okay, so, and multiple test cases. So you don't really rewrite the logic of a particular general module. For example, if you see, you have click events over each one of this, right? And this is pretty common in each of these pages. So whichever page you go, so this scenarios, all these items remains constant. Correct. Now you, if you go ahead and start writing the test cases for each of the page, you will have the repetition. So that is where what you do is you actually create a normal Java class and you dump all the events. For example, load the home page, load personal loan, load car loan, right? Enter car loan amount, enter interest rate, enter loan tenure. So all these, if you see, are the scenarios which are present in the web application. Okay, so let me go with an example. You will be much clear. So here, what we are doing is I have written a class. So this is a normal Java class. Okay, so I have initialized the class and I have written a set of functions. Now, what does each of this function do? Okay, so I have the init class set driver, which will set the web driver and load the web page. I mean, it doesn't load the web page; it just loads the web driver. So I have written one function. I have written another function to load the home loan tab. Okay. So in this, all I did is, hello, you guys are able to hear me? Right. So what I'm saying is I'm showing you now the class which contains or which follows the page object model. Okay. In page object model, what you do is you don't go and write all the logic of interacting with the web page in a test case. So if you see here, I have written the logic of interacting with a web page, the logic or the code for interacting with a web page inside a test case. Now, if I have to use the same logic in some other test case, I will have to rewrite the same code again. Correct? So probably if you want to make sure that you need to see if you give a wrong credentials, will it fail or not? So you write another test case. So you actually you rewrite the logic of uh, you know interacting with the web page again all over. Okay, so this becomes the repetition. So in order to structure your all the test case, one of the methods is this page object model. In this page object model, what you do is you write functions specific for a particular event in a web page. And in this scenario, we are going with this EMI calculator. Okay. So in this EMI calculator, we are going with this home loan page where you have the loading the home loan tab, you have the text boxes, and you have the outputs to be read. Okay. So what I do is I actually write a function for each of this event. First is selecting the home loan tab. So this is one event, right? So I write a function and I return the particular event or the element once the home loan tab is selected. Okay, selecting the home loan tab is one. Okay, the next item is entering a value into this particular home loan amount, the amount taken from the home loan. So that is one element, one event. So I write one function for that. Okay, the same way we have multiple input boxes. So I write one function for each input box. Okay, and then I want to read the output after entering all the values. So that is the next step. So I have three outputs. So I return the function to get me the amount which is actually being generated, or the value which is being generated from those three div elements. So if you see here, I have actually written a function which will actually help me to generalize the logic and which will help me to reuse the same function in my multiple test cases. Okay, so once this particular function is written, I go to my test case. Okay, in my test case, okay, this is not the one. They'll remove all my JUnit. Okay, right. Okay, so if you see that now, if you see the test case, the JUnit test case, what I have done is I have written the initialization of the WebDriver. Okay, and at the rate before, all I did is I have initialized the class. I have initialized the class, and I have asked the I have sent the type of browser. So okay, so this is written in a different. Let me just rewrite. Let me just copy paste, make a new one. Okay, so I have this. Now let me make a new class. Okay, and here I write. Okay, and inside this, so if you see, all I'm going to do is I'm going to call these functions, which is basically reusing the logic which I have written, and I will be just writing the test case. So first I'll have to initialize this particular class object. And this particular object dot. So I call this set driver to initialize the WebDriver page, WebDriver as such. Okay, so set WebDriver, and I will have to pass what is the driver which I want. I will say Firefox. Okay, once this is done, I will also add one more class function. Load page. Which I will add the weight. Okay, so this particular function returns me the WebDriver once initialized. So I will say driver equal to my calculator driver. So this will be my post processing, pre processing. Sorry, and in my @test. So the scenario is so I'll have to enter the values and read the output, right? So let me just check the code. So here is what we have. Load the page, load the tab. So first step is click on the home loan. So I will go ahead and I will say driver, sorry, EMI calculator dot home page tab load, where I'll have to pass the driver dot click EMI calculator. Now I need to enter the amount into each of these text boxes. So I will take the functions driver comma value. Okay, same way we have other two text boxes. Enter loan amount, enter the interest, so it's the interest rate. So let's say 5, and enter terms. Let me just give some. Okay, then I'll have to read the outputs. So I've written the functions, read EMI amount and etc. So I'll just do a sysop read total amount. Read total interest. And then at the rate after. In this we have the driver. I say driver dot close. Okay, so this will be my ideal scenario. Okay, so let me just walk you through once more so that you guys are clear on what we actually did. Right? So our target is to write a test case using page object model. Now, what is page object model? In page object model, you write all the functions, you actually generalize all the events. Okay, so you write all blocks of codes which will help you to interact, which will actually cover all the scenarios which are present in a web page. That is where you say page object. So you actually generalize and keep a functions, write multiple functions which will handle each event in a web page. Now, if you take this web page, in our current web page, so you have the clicking of the loading a web driver, the loading the web page, okay, loading this particular tab, entering the amount in this input, three inputs, and reading the outputs. Okay, each one of them is a scenario in which you interact with this particular web page. Okay, so when it comes to page object model, what you do is you write a class which will does nothing but interacting with that does that particular action. So clicking or selecting this particular tab, so that is one action. So I have a function which does nothing but just selects that particular tab. Okay, next entering the value into this particular text box. So I have one function which does nothing but uh, taking care of everything required, starting from identifying that particular element to clearing the text and entering the string value which is being passed as an input to the particular function. Okay, same way you have other two text boxes. Okay, and then finally you need to read the output which is being generated by the web page. So that goes into these three locations. So you write three functions which should actually read the output which is being generated by the page. So do we write the class based on the web page to be tested? Example login page, we have written our own class. Home page has its own class. Okay, so we have a question here. Do we write the classes based on the web page? Yes, you definitely write. Uh, See, ideally, you don't mix up two web applications. So this is one web application and this is another web application. So in ideal scenario, these two will be two different projects. Okay, and for every web page, one single web page, you write one class, and that particular class will have all the elements. It will handle all, it will have the functions required to handle each and every event present in that particular web page. So that is how you maintain the structure. Each web page So one web application will be one project, and one web page will be one class. Okay, and each scenario, each interactive scenario in a web page will be a function in your class. Did I answer your question? Okay, fine. So the same way here. So generally, this application will have its own, you know, project. So this test case of this particular whole application will be a project. And if I have multiple web pages, I click on this, I go to another web page. So this is another web page. So still, this is a Google web app, I mean Play Store, but assume this is another web page. So all the interactions which you do in this web page will go to another class. So you make one more class. So you have a package which contains all these classes. So interacting with the EMI calculator page, interacting with the Play Store will be one class. So you can make that class and you write all the events which are present in that class as a function. Okay, so that way you will have cover each page with each class and all the events present in that each web page. Okay, I'm coming back to the same thing. Clear? In our scenario, I have written a class which will help us to interact with this home loan page, where it starts with selecting this particular tab, entering the values into this particular text boxes, and reading the values from this particular output values. So 3 plus 3 plus 1 and 2. So totally 8 functions you will find it here. And when it comes to my test case, I will not be directly interacting with the web page now. Okay, all I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize an object for this particular class. Okay, and I'm going to call the functions which will do the interaction part. Okay, so let's just execute this and see how it actually works. It's gonna work exactly the same way. There will be no difference in what we did. Okay, it's only the way we write. Now, the added advantages of following this application method is that I don't really have to rewrite the logic of interacting that particular element again and again. So since I have a function now, so wherever in any test case, not only in this class, it can be any test class, any test case, any test scenario. Okay, all I have to do is I have to call that particular function, and that particular action will be done. Point number one. So, which essentially means all the you know scenarios which are to be taken care for accessing this particular text box will be in one single place. So let's say today you see this particular text box is just like you just have to access this and enter. Okay, so assume that you don't follow this method and this particular text box is appearing in say 10 pages and you write the logic of accessing that and then you write all the scenarios to handle that particular text box in all the 10 different test cases and tomorrow the developer changes something. Okay, so it becomes really tedious for you to go and change in every test scenario and every test case. Whereas in this method, since you have generalized the accessing of this text box in a single function, tomorrow if any change happens, all you have to do is you'll have to come here and add those additional scenarios of handling the text box over here. And it will reflect in all your test cases because you are calling this particular function. Okay, so it becomes really important in POM. How do you add synchronization points? What do you mean by synchronization points? Can you be more specific? Wait for an element to be present. Right. So if you are actually performing, see, when you write a particular function, all that particular function takes care is, okay, here is my element, here is what I have to do to perform that particular action. Okay. Now the waiting and orchestration of your test case can go inside this particular test scenario. So if you believe, if you think that you will have to wait, so that particular wait action can actually go over here, right? So that is the orchestration of the test case. If you believe that you have entered some value which the web page will take time to calculate, you can always write that particular wait action in your test at the rate test function. Correct? Or if you believe that this particular element or this particular action always takes time, it is by default, you can always write that particular wait element inside this function itself, so that you don't have to write the same thing in every test case. So it is about the repeatability. So if that scenario appears in every test case, you move it to the general function. If the scenario appears only in a specific test case, you handle in this test case, so that you don't disturb the function which is being used in other test cases. Clear? Okay. So overall, did you guys understand? So I see one person who has understood. What about others? You guys are lost. Should we just go through it once more from the basic? Shall we? Should we go once more regarding this page object model, or are you guys understood? So we have two people who understood. Others, okay. So we have one person who's asking. Okay, two people. Okay, fine. Mm, just give me a minute. I'll be back. Just 1 minute. Okay. Hi guys, sorry for the interruption. So let's do this once more. Okay, let me take another scenario and explain you guys in detail. Fine, you guys there? Okay, fine. So let's take a bit more complicated page. Okay, and write down the scenarios. Assume that you are writing a complete test case for this complete application. Okay, so assuming that you are writing a complete test case for this complete application. So what do? First step is you will have to create a project for this particular application. Since it's a complete application, you maintain one project which contains all the test cases for this application. Okay, so if you see in this place, so this is a landing page, and you have the left side bar, and you have a few other links on the web page. Okay, so let me just write it down. So we need to write test cases for this web application. So this is a complete web application. Now if you see, what are the things do we have? We have the left side panel. So let's take page 1. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to see what all things we have in this web application, and what will happen if you don't follow page object model, and what is the advantages we'll get if we follow a page object model. Okay, it might sound simple, but when you actually go into a proper scenario, and as and when you keep developing and as and when the changes comes, it becomes pretty tedious. But if you follow the page object model, the changes which you do your code to your test case as and when the web application changes, it will be pretty easy to manage. Okay, so in this scenario, you have page 1, the landing page. Okay, in the landing page you have the left panel, you have a calculator, and a few other links on the bottom. Agreed? Fine. Now the next step is, if you have to go to page 2. Now we have page 2. So that is the page in which we made the changes. That is the interest calculator. Correct? Assume this is the page 2. Page 2 is interest calculator. Okay. Now to first step, what you need to do is first reaching the page. Scenario 1. Scenario 2 is uh, making sure you enter all the values. Okay, or let me say not text boxes, input elements. Okay, and finally I want to read the output from this page. Correct? Likewise, you have n number of pages. So assume that you are actually writing a test case for all these scenarios. Okay, and this particular project is under development. So it is not completely finished. So the developers are developing the whole thing, and you are still actually writing the test case as and when the developers are finished with one page. Okay. Now, if that is the scenario, and if you straight away go ahead and start writing a test case, let's say a JUnit test case, say you take the first page and you say first item is to check the left panel. So you write the test cases straight away to check the left panels and the click events. And you go ahead and then write the test case for checking the calculator click events and all the links. So if you write it in the test case as such, okay, so if you write it like this, so if you are interacting with the web page over here, okay, if tomorrow the developers, the inputs from the client, assume the client might change and he might want it in a different way, so he changes the whole thing. Assume he changes the whole thing. So what would you do? So probably he adds some styling over here, or probably he changes the way in which the HTML tags are present inside this, or he may do any other change. Okay, so what would you do in that scenario? So you actually go, so you have this particular left panel in every page you have written, correct? Say you have this home page is one, okay, so home page has a left panel. This, the reaching of this particular page also has an interaction with the left panel. Agreed? Others, are you guys following what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to describe here is a scenario in which the page object model, I'm will actually make sense that we have to follow it. Okay. So in this scenario, assume that the project is still undergoing, and you are actually trying to list down the multiple pages in which you have to write the test cases. Now, in this multiple pages, you have the common entity, which is the left panel. Okay. Now, what I'm trying to say is, if the developer goes and change the any makes any changes in the left panel, it becomes tedious for you to go and change in every test case which you have written the interaction. Correct? Whereas, if you go ahead and follow this particular page object model, what do you do? So you have a login page, okay? I mean the landing page. So in the landing page, you have a left panel. So you go ahead and write a function for interacting with each and every element in this particular left panel, which it helps you to generalize all the logic required for handling the left panel inside a single function, one function or two couple of functions, okay, depending upon the logic. So tomorrow if the developer changes something, okay, so all you have to do is you'll have to go to this particular function and make a change over there for the interacting with that particular element, and that will automatically reflect in every page of test case you have written. Agreed? Yes, no? You want me to repeat once more? All I'm trying to tell you guys is what is the scenario and what is the added advantage of using the page object model. What about others? Astosh, Varsha, did you guys understand? So what we are trying to do here is generalize all the common components and every interaction with the web page, so that later on you can go ahead and use it in your test cases, and whenever there is a change which happens. So there are two added advantages. One is the delta changes which you do your test cases will be minimized. Second thing is the structuring of the whole project. Okay, so all the interactions with the web applications goes into the set of classes, and all the test scenarios goes into another set of classes. Okay, clear? Yes, no? So if you can point out and ask a question where exactly you didn't understand, I can elaborate in that. So I see there are two people who understood. So what about the rest 31 people? So if you can tell me any question, if you can ask any question where you guys are not clear. Okay, so I'll explain the code. And what about the concept of page object model? So I'm trying to explain the concept of page object model. I'll explain the code, no issues. But the concept of page object model, is that clear? That's the first thing. The code is nothing but generalizing into a functions. It has nothing much, but the whole concept that being a tester, so first step is to actually identify all the elements in a web page, all the scenarios in a web page, all the test scenarios. Okay, so once you list them out, so you should do something like this. What are my pages and what are my scenarios? And then what you do is you don't go ahead and write it in a test case straight away, because there will definitely be scenarios where you are using the same element or a generic element across all the test cases. And tomorrow, if some changes happen to that element, it becomes very tedious for you to go and change the same thing in every single test case. Instead, what we do is we follow this page object model and we generalize all these events, all the events which actually helps you to interact, which way you have to interact with the web application goes to a single function each. So each scenario, each interaction will go to one function, and you use that particular function in the test case, so that tomorrow you want to change something, you just change it in that particular function alone, and it will reflect in every test case which you have used. Okay, so is the concept clear? Do you have any question in the concept? Then I'll go to the code. Any questions regarding the concept or why we doing all this? No questions? Okay, fine. So let's walk through the code. So in this code, I have two classes. One class which actually defines the page object model. So this is the page object model for this particular tab. Okay. So if we go through line by line, so I have named it as EMI calculator. Okay. And inside this, I have some 8 functions written. Now each of this function will perform a specific task in that web page. So if you start with the first particular web page function is does nothing but it actually defines all the web drivers. So here what I do is I take an input. Okay, the input will be a string and it will be one of the just a minute. Right. So if you see here in the first function, all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put the initialization of all the web drivers in one place. So all I have to do is in my test case, all I have to do is I just have to say that I want this particular browser, and that respective browser's WebDriver will be loaded. If I say Firefox, Firefox driver will get loaded. If I say Chrome, Chrome driver will get loaded. Accordingly, you guys can write IE, Opera, Safari, whatever browsers you want. You can write it in one single function. So depending upon the input which you pass when you call this function, that particular WebDriver will be loaded. This is my first function. All I'm trying to do here is selecting a particular WebDriver and initializing that particular WebDriver. Okay. Now this particular class I can use throughout the complete web application and all the test pages. In my second function, if you see, all I'm doing is I'm loading the landing page. Okay, so I'm actually giving the implicit wait for the load and loading the page. That is my second function. Okay. Fine. In my third function, so once I load the page, I have a couple of multiple scenarios. First is I will have to select the home loan tab. Okay. Next is I will have to enter values into these three text boxes. Next is reading the output once the values are entered into the text boxes. So I have 3 plus 3 plus 1, 7 scenarios, and so I will have to write a function for which handles each of the scenarios. So the first scenario, selecting the home loan tab. So I write, so all I do is driver.findElement by CSS. I select the anchor tag for this tab. So if you see, it has an ID home loan. Inside that there is an anchor. So all I do is driver.findElement CSS selector home-loan space A, which means select that particular anchor tag. So I save it in this variable and I return that variable. Okay. So that becomes my third function. Now my next function is to interact or enter value inside this particular input box. So what I do, I name a function, I pass the driver and the amount to be entered into the text box. So these are the two input variables which I say I want it for this function. So what do? So I use this driver and say find element by ID. Since this particular input text box has an ID, loan amount. So I'm going to use this loan amount as ID and I say find element by ID loan amount. I save it in a web element and then I say clear the amount which is already existing in that particular text box and enter the value which is been passed as an input to the function. So this particular functions help me and it also handles all the scenarios of accessing the function, accessing the text box and making sure the value which I pass will be the value into this text box. Okay, so this is the piece of logic which will interact with this text box. So this is my fourth function. The same way I have two other text boxes. So I have written the functions which will does the same thing. Identify the text box, clear the text in the text box and enter the key which is an input to this function. So this is my two functions, each function for one text box. Okay, the next item is once I enter the values in this text box, I will have to read the output which has been generated from this web page from these three locations. So what do I have to do? So I have written a function read EMI amount. So in this again, first identify the element. So it will be EMI summary, payment summary, or EMI amount, child P, child span. So EMI amount, P, and the span. So I have identified the element, store the variable in a store that in an object variable, and then I said get text, which will give me the text which is present inside the EMI amount inside this particular location, and I will return that particular value. So the similar way, I have two text inputs, I mean output locations. So I have returned two functions to do the respective tasks. First is identify the particular location, and then read text and return the text. So this is the overall functions I have written to interact with this web page. Okay. Now when I come to my test case scenario, first thing is I will have to initialize this particular class, which I have done in the @ before in my pre-processing. Then I said I want to load, I want to use Firefox. So I load the WebDriver, and then I say using this driver load my page. So this page is what is comes to here. So it loads the page. Then in my test case scenario, all I say is click over the home loan tab just to make sure if it loads in any other state, I'm gonna make sure that I am loading this particular tab. So I say select the home loan tab and perform a click event. Then I say enter loan amount, enter loan interest, enter loan terms, and then I say read EMI amount, read EMI total amount, read EMI total interest, and I print it. And in the at the end, when I initialize the driver, I close the particular driver. Now I can write any number of test cases. Okay, I can write any number of test cases. All I have to do is call these functions and change the input. Correct? And when I since I have generalized the initialization of a browser, so if I have to move today, if I have running in Firefox, now I want in Chrome. So all I have to say is Chrome. This will execute in Chrome. Now tomorrow, if some advanced version has come and you have to set some other property, all I will do is I will go change it here, the respective changes, and it's done. So all my test cases, if I write 10 test cases, test files, I don't really have to do anything. So since it is calling the same function, all the scenarios or all the logic required to handle that particular web page or the changes will go here, and it will reflect in all your test cases. This is a page object model. Are we clear? Please ask questions where you are not clear. If you have any kind of doubt, please ask right now. Is it clear? Are you guys lost? Others? Okay. Now, in a test case, okay, so this is the page object model. There is nothing more into that. It is all about generalization and structuring of the code and reusability of the code. Simple three lines. Structure the code, make sure you modularize your events, and reusability. That's all, nothing more in that. Okay. Now, when you are writing a test case, okay, so there is something called as assert. Okay. Now, an assert is something which will help you to 1 minute. Okay. So let me show you a scenario for assert. Right. So here, if you see, we have written a test case, right? So in this, so I'm coming back to login page where I'm trying to enter the username password and click on login. Okay. Now here, uh, there is until and unless there is an error, the test you will not know whether the test case has successfully logged in or not. Until and unless you see the print statement in the console, you will not know. But this is not the ideal way you would write a test case. So a test case always ends with a assert. So there is something called assert. So this is the syntax for assert. So you say assert. This is a class, and assert has a assert true. Okay. Now in this particular, so whatever you generally write inside any statement goes inside this. So it accepts a condition which will say if it returns true, it will actually let the test case pass. If it returns false, it will make the test case fail. Okay. So inside an assert function, you need to write the code which will say, let me show you, true. So this will actually always makes my test case pass. Okay. So if I, let me just remove this. So I commented the other test case. So if I run this JUnit, so the outcome of the test case, if it has failed or not, comes will be shown over here. So if it is all green means generally all the test cases are successfully executed. Okay, without any errors. Now, how can you make sure that the login has successfully happened or not? Say assume I give a wrong login. Now ideally this particular test case have to show failure. And when I say failure, it has to be here. The test case has to fail. How can you make sure the test case fails when it's a wrong scenario or something goes wrong? Okay. So in this scenario, it will still pass. Why? Because I have not put a proper assert statement to verify whether my test case has been successfully processed or not. Mm, this is an error. Okay, it's trying to find the element, it is not able to find it. What is the scenario? Okay, so generally you write all the try-catch boxes. I'll explain you what a try-catch block is later. So for now, we just make sure that there is no exception which is being raised from our test case. Okay, so the actual way of making sure a test case has been failed or not is using the assert statements. Okay, so this shows past because our assertion is always true. Okay, now if I put this scenario like this, it says the login is failed, but this is not the actual way of showing that test case has been failed. The ideal scenario of showing a test case is failed or passed is by putting this assertion statement. Now, when I say assert dot assert true, this particular function, okay, is accepting a condition, a conditional check. In this case, this is my conditional check to see if this particular item equals central position control board or not. So if it is true, it actually says that the test case is passed. If it is false, it says that test case has failed. Let's test that out. Okay, fine. So this is one important statement, assert true, which will be the ending decision point of the test case or the test scenario which you write. So you should always use this assert true to finally figure out, okay, this is the outcome which I wanted. Did I get it or not? Yes, the test case passed. No, the test case failed. Okay, and ideally your test case should not fail because of any exception. So it is up to the tester to handle all the exception handling. You should make sure all the exceptions are handled, and after that, in the assert statement is where you decide your test case has been passed or failed. Okay, so if I give proper input values, this particular thing will pass. Okay, So this is about JUnit, page object model, and assertion statement. Clear? Are you guys clear? Okay. So we're gonna stop here today, and we'll continue with more topics tomorrow. And after that, we'll have. There is no disadvantage of page object model as such. Only disadvantage would be if your application is very small, you don't really have to go ahead and you don't really have the major changes happening over a period of time. You can go ahead and straight away quickly write a test case and be done with it. That's the only disadvantage of page object model. Like it's a race against the number of the how huge your application is versus how much time you have and how many test cases you have. If your time is less, the number of test cases is less, and the pages are not going to change, you can straight away go ahead and write a test case which handles all the scenarios, which test all the scenarios and be done with it. Else, it is advised that you follow this page object model. So always remember, in the first session also we have discussed when to use a Selenium testing and when not to use. So it's always a race against the time versus the changes being done. So if it's not much, you step into the case writing the test case as such. Else you can do manual testing or you can write a simple test case and then be done with it. Okay.